mess with it. But if God doesn't want it to grow, it will not grow. Here's what he's saying. He causes the grass to grow, it says here, for the cattle. You know what that means? That means, Woody, you're not to eat grass. Now, if Debbie feeds you that, you better eat it. I'm just telling you. No? Okay. Well, we're not supposed to eat grass, but God gave the grass for the cattle to eat. Why? So that he could provide stuff, the cattle could provide things for man. We get milk from the cattle, correct? You need milk. You know, I grew up, that's all I drank most of the time was milk. My mom looked at me and said, I'm buying 2 gallons of milk a week. What are you doing? I said, I'm drinking it. Cereal with Pop-Tarts, with dinner, with lunch, with breakfast. For a snack, I drank milk. Well, that's what God's given it to us for. But you know what else he's done? He's also given us that cattle for labor, to do different things for us, to help us. They would take that cattle at times and have it go around the wheel to crush the corn, to make the corn into flour, so they could make their bread. But then, my favorite thing cattle is for, meat. A T-bone steak, pot roast, all those great things. God did that. And how do we get these cattle to get fat for us? It tells us right here in verse 14, he calls it the grass to grow for what? For the cattle. Now, I know we look at the grass and we think, well, there's something else I have to cut. Boy, oh boy, it's growing high again. I got to get it cut. Jonah just had to come out yesterday and cut the church's, if you want to call it grass. I called it more weeds than anything else. But it looked terrible. It needed to be cut. Well, God causes it to grow for the cattle. But look what else it says. An herb for the service of man, that he may bring forth food out of the earth. He provides the green herb for man. You know what this does? Talks about it means he provides for our gardens. How many of y'all have ever grown a garden? I like to grow a garden. I probably won't this year just because we're not in our house and I'd be getting it started by now. But I'd like to grow a garden. I love to grow a garden. I remember the first time I ever grew a garden, I had tomato plants. You think those would be the easiest thing in the world to grow tomatoes, right? You are so mistaken. I hate tomato plants at times when I first started because I never could get a tomato to come on those plants. Those plants would grow about this big, and next thing I know, they were dead. I'm like, what did I do? I watered it. I even used Miracle Grow on it. Something's not right. I went to people in the church that I was at the time. I said, hey, y'all got a huge garden. Help me. And a man by the name of Mr. Clyde. Mr. Clyde, first time I ever met him was about the first week I'd been at the church. Come to find out, he fell out of a pine tree about 30 feet in the air, broke his rib and blackened his eye. The problem was the man was legally blind. He was climbing up in a tree to trim limbs off. And when I got to the house, his shoe was still stuck in the limb when he fell out the tree. Got into his house, a couple ribs were broken. I walked in and said, Mr. Clyde, how you doing? I said, I'm doing fine. How are you, Kevin? We were over at their house almost every Sunday. They'd invite us over to eat. They were like our mom and dad when we moved there. They loved on us. They cared for us. We went to their house, and he would look at us and go, what kind of ice cream? Rick, you love him. What kind of ice cream you want for dessert? And we go, what kind you got? He goes, what kind you want? They had a freezer in their garage. And anytime Breyers went on sale, they bought every flavor that they could and filled their freezer up with it. Rick, you would have loved it. You'd have been in there every day with a spoon. He loved his ice cream. Oh, Mary Lee, too. You loved it, too. He was my friend. And so I went to him and I said, Clyde, I want to grow a garden, man, but I stink at this. Can you help me? Sure. I'll be over tomorrow. And I thought, oh boy. His wife brought him over. He had somehow managed to get a tiller, a big rototiller. He goes, this is what you're going to do. And we tilled big area in my backyard. Go through and do this. Come on. He goes, I'm going to sit here and watch. I went through and I tilled it all. He goes, all right, rake it up. Let's get your rows. Let's get this. Let's do this. Let's do that. Let's do this. And I remember that was the most successful garden I ever had. He taught me. Mr. Clyde. Still remember that. We had a little tiny section we planned for Abigail. She was 1, 2 years old. And I remember she got a pepper that came on about that big. And I said, look, you got a little pepper growing. You know what she did? She walked right up to it and snatched it off and ate it. I went, no, 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 no. Too late. It's already in her mouth. She's, yeah, she didn't say, but she ate it. Well, if you look at what it says here, he's saying God has made it possible for man to have those herbs, to have that garden. He's given us what we need so that the ground can bring forth food for us. That's what God's done for us. That's why we should say, bless the Lord, O my soul. He even goes on in verse 15, the wine that maketh glad the heart of man, and oil to make his face shine, and bread which strengtheneth man's heart. God provides the rain for man to have the wine, the oil, and the bread. Problem was, God gave us the wine, and what has man done? Man has used it to get drunk instead of what he wanted us to use these things for. The oil is used to make our faces shine. Now, I know a lot of people say we shouldn't use oil. How many of you have ever told you shouldn't use oil in things? Don't fry anything in oil. You know, you use an air fryer. What's the fun of that? I like all that stuff. You know, it makes me happy. My arteries may be hardening, but at least I'm going to die happy with a little bit of chicken grease around my mouth, maybe. Well, you know what it says here in the Mediterranean area, and even in the area where the Bible was written, people would use oil upon their face to make their face shine. Now, we look at it today, and we don't want to have a shiny face. I don't want to have a shiny forehead. You got to put some kind of powder on there to make it to where it doesn't shine in your cheek. Yeah, this was something that showed the people during that time that they were a joyous people when your face was shining. That's why he says an oil to make his face shine. But then he says bread. Folks, when you don't have bread, this usually means that there's a time of drought and starvation will come because of this. So what he's saying here is he's saying, hey, God has given all that to make the heart of man glad, to make the man's face shine, and to strengthen man's heart. God's done those things. Bless the Lord, O my soul, that he has given us what he's given us. But God also provides these waters, as he says in verse 16, for the trees. The trees of the Lord are full of sap, the cedars of Lebanon, which he hath planted. These trees are the Lord's trees and are flowing with life. That's what the sap is in the tree. If you ever take a tree and you don't find sap in it, it usually means that tree's got dying or dead, one of the two. Pine trees are horrible for that, aren't they? You get some of that pine tar or the pine sap on your hands, and it feels like it's never going to come off. You're going to stick to everything, and everything's going to stick to you. Well, that's its life. That's the lifeblood of that tree. And he allows them to grow. That's why he says the cedars of Lebanon. These weren't small trees. These were ginormous trees. He's letting them grow strong through that sap. But do you notice here it says the trees of Lebanon are full of sap, the cedars of Lebanon, which he planted. Do you know that God placed every tree where it is at today for a reason? He planted every... I've always been... When I've been in the forest as a child, my mind would go to, I wonder where these trees came from. God put them there. God planted those trees. God placed them exactly where they're at for a reason. Now, can somebody tell me why God even gave us trees? Come on, you scientific minds. For oxygen. Hey, cut down all the trees, right? Then we all die. You need the trees. God gave us the trees for a reason, and he planted every one of them. He's giving us what we need. Do you see that? He wants them to grow. He wants them to get big. He wants them to provide the oxygen for us to live. God did that for us. God provided these things for us. It's the trees of the Lord. They're his. We should say, bless the Lord, O my soul, when he does that for us. Look in verse 17. These trees he didn't just make for us, but he also made them for the birds. It says, where the birds make their nest, as for the stork, the fir trees are her house. Hey, this is what God says. I made the trees. Yes, I made it for you as humans so you have oxygen, but also made them for the trees to make it their homes. The birds can go to these trees and put their nests in them, can raise their family in them. He provides shelter for these defenseless animals. The stork, I think it's interesting how he says, and as for the stork, the fir trees are her house. The stork is a different animal, isn't it, altogether, looking, a stork. Well, he's saying here the stork puts his house in the fir trees for a reason. The stork finds home there because her nest is called a house, because she actually exhibits domestic virtues with her family and treats them like her children. A stork will almost act like a chicken, like a hen, with their chicks. And so he says, even for the stork, God has done this. No creature, great or small, is left out of God's care. But then he tells us in verse 18, the high hills are a refuge for the wild goats, and the rocks for the conies. Have you ever seen pictures of wild goats and you notice that they're standing not on top of the mountain, but they're on the side of the mountain? And it looks like there's a place about this much for them to stand, and the four legs are standing, and they're looking out like, what do you want? Yeah, I'm standing here. Just go away. And they're taking a picture, and you're thinking, how? Okay, you got there. What's next? Where are you going on a ledge that big? How are you going to get to one 5 feet away? And they do it. And you're like, how? God created them that way. God created the hills for that refuge for those wild goats. He let, as it says earlier, we saw in verse 13, that he watered the hills for the wild goats. That's where they live. That's where they graze. That's where they eat. That's where they stay away from the prey that would try to kill them, these wild goats. But also for the conies. Conies are a weird kind of animal. These were the ones that live literally only in Palestine and around Jordan. They live in the caves, and they're about the size of a rabbit, about so big, but they kind of look like a weasel. All right? Something you ladies aren't going to want running around your home like a ferret or something like that. But they're called conies, and that's why they use them here in the Bible. And God says, hey, you know what? I even made rocks for the conies to dwell in for their safety. See, when God does things, he doesn't just do it halfway. He provides for everything. Because we see secondly and finally tonight that God places the sun and the moon in verses 19 through 23. You know what? The sun and the moon did not just appear one day in the sky. It didn't just happen. God spoke them into existence. God placed them both there for a reason. It says in verse 19, he appointed the moon for seasons. Anybody ever heard that? He appointed the moon for the different seasons. Autumn moon you may have, or different things of that nature. That's what he's talking about here. God placed these here for the seasons. John Calvin said this, the Hebrews, having been accustomed to compute their months by the moon, this served for regulating their festival days and assemblies, both sacred and political. And so the moon has been used for years through all the way from the beginning to show when different seasons were going to come and when seasons were going to end and so on and so forth. The days were going to get longer and shorter. I mean, have you noticed that the days are getting a little longer now? Sun's coming up a little bit early because next Sunday you're supposed to set your clocks. What is it? We spring forward, so you set your clocks an hour ahead. Yeah, that means I think we lose an hour, doesn't it? Nobody likes that time. They like to fall back when they can gain an hour of rest. But we got to do that next Sunday, so you got to think about those things. So he placed it there for a reason. God appointed the moon for seasons, and the sun knoweth his going down. God made the sun, and he knows when it goes down. Why does the sun go down? Well, look what it says. Verse 20, thou makest darkness, and it is night. You know, God wants man to work during the daylight hours, correct? That's the reason why God made us the way he made us. That's the reason why when it starts getting dark, we start getting ourselves ready for what? Bed. Time to go to sleep. It's time to go to get some rest. It's time, because we've been working all day. It used to be you worked from sun up to sundown, correct? You got up with the chickens. You went to bed when the sun went down. That's how it goes. Nowadays, you don't get going to work until 9. You get home at 5. We got it good, by the way, if you think about it, 9 to 5. They used to work 6 to 7 or 8 at night. 6 in the morning, 7 or 8 at night. Got to work while God gives us light. Well, God gives us that for a reason. God makes the darkness. He makes it so that people will know it's time to get rest. He wants there to be darkness so that people will appreciate the light that He gives to us. We should see the darkness of sin, how it dispels the light. This should make us understand what He means by men love darkness rather than light when it tells us in the book of John. And it prepares us for the evening to get ourselves ready to work. But look what else it says. Verse 20, Thou makest darkness, and it is night, wherein all the beasts of the forest do creep forth. Well, now it's time for all these different animals to come forward at night. Now think about this. If you notice what it says in these verses, it says the young lions roar after their prey and seek their meat from God. Well, here's the thing we need to understand. Normally, a lion is going to do its hunting at night, in the darkness. Now think about that. In the Bible, we hear that God looks at Satan as being a roaring lion, wandering about, seeking whom he may devour. Now think about this. When is that lion going to be out then? The darkness. It's going to be out in the night. The darkness of sin. The darkness of this world. He's walking about roaring, seeking whom he may devour. That's why at night is not the best time to be walking around going to work, is it? Not during this time. This is the reason, if you keep reading these verses, it says, the sun ariseth. They, meaning the lions, gathered themselves together and laid them down in their dens. He says, you know what? God's put this clock within them to know, it's time to go lay down. And that's good for man. Why? Because it says in verse 23, man goeth forth unto his work and to his labor until the evening. Man can actually go out there and not have to worry about the lion bothering him. Could you imagine if you had to go plow your field and at the same time always be looking for that pesky lion that's going to come around and try to kill you? Come on, Bessie. Keep moving. I don't know, he's around. I hear something. Just keep going. We never get anything done, would we? Looking over our shoulder, being scared to death. But God has made it so that we can get things done that we need to get done. He has placed it this way for the sun to be up when it's supposed to, and for the moon to be up when it's supposed to. Again, this is all part of God's plan for creation, and all part of God's plan for man. And that's something we need to understand and see with these verses to see what He is telling us. Think about this. George Horne said this, when the light of truth and righteousness shineth, error and iniquity fly away before it, and the roaring lion himself departeth for a time. Then the Christian goeth forth to the work of his salvation and to his labor of love, until the evening of old age warns him to prepare for the last repose in faith of a joyful resurrection. What a brilliant picture he points to us here and points for us here. Error and iniquity will fly away when the light of truth hits it. This is the reason why many times you'll find people that will rob a house at night. Why? Because it's dark. They can't see anything. Nobody can see you. They can get in and get out, hopefully, that nobody. But they don't like it when all of a sudden you go into a room and a light comes on. Or you walk up in front of the house and the spotlight comes on. Or it's even better now that you got these things with the rings, the ring doorbell, then you hear somebody go, "What are you doing?" That's even better. They've got an audio now where you can talk to them. "Hey, what are you doing on my property?" They're gone. That's even better. Because God knows that man does not like the light. Sinful man would rather have the darkness. But he knows that we as Christians need to use that light. The time that we have, we need to use it to tell others about Him. He's given us light. He's given us the ability. He's given us the know-how. He's given us His Word so that we can go and tell others about Him. Don't let the darkness scare us. Let's bring the light in. And folks, it doesn't matter how big the light is. If you're in complete and utter darkness, even a match is welcome. Even a little pin light. You ever seen those? My dad had one, I remember. It looked just like a pin, but when you took it out, it was actually a flashlight. And when you clicked it, it was a flashlight. Did it give a lot of light? No. But it was the coolest thing, and he would put it on his, I think he used to use it, he used to own a filling station. He used to work on cars and trucks, had his own filling station. And I think he used it when he would look at people's cars for different things. Maybe we had to look in certain places, but it looked just like a pin. That little light, you think, wouldn't matter a hill of beans. But when you're in utter darkness, that little bit of light means a lot. He's saying here, I'm placing these things for you, for man. I'm doing it. I've done it. And you know what we should say? Go back to verse 1. Bless the Lord, O my soul. All that is within me, bless His holy name. That's what we should say when we think of creation and what He's done for us and how He's given to us so much. Next time, even tonight, we're going to go back here in just a minute and have chili. Guess what? God took care of the cattle for us, didn't He? If you used hamburger meat in your chili, guess what? He took that grass for the cattle, for you, so that you could have it for this evening. If your child's going to have some milk, guess what? God took care of that. If you're going to have some kind of green herbs or a garden this year, guess what? God took care of it. God took care of everything for us. The least we could do is thank Him for it, isn't it? Bless the Lord, O my soul. Let's bow our heads tonight. Heads bowed and eyes closed. No one looking around tonight. The invitation is quite simple. When we look around and see all that God's given to us, what do we say? We say, bless the Lord for what He's done. Bless the Lord for His goodness. Bless the Lord for His bounty. Bless the Lord for His provision. Bless the Lord for the sun that's in the sky and the moon that's in the evening time. Bless the Lord for the light that He gives to us and that we should give to others. Bless the Lord, O my soul. Gracious Heavenly Father, I want to bless Thee tonight for providing for us, taking care of us, giving us everything we need. I want to thank Thee, Lord, tonight for Thy provision, Thy protection, giving us the light during the day and the moon in the evenings. Lord, we thank Thee for that. Lord, I thank Thee for providing food for our table, providing strength for us to be able to go and have a garden and to be able to reap the bounty that we have sown. Father, I thank Thee for just the goodness of God. And I pray tonight, as we have this invitation, that we would also come to Thee with grateful hearts. Just say, bless the Lord, O my soul. I pray this all in Jesus' holy and precious name. Amen. Heads bowed and eyes closed. Let's all stand together as Miss Mary Lee plays a song.